That's it. That's a wrap on the 2024 regular season. And I don't know who's all excited for this, but there is a bowl game that will be left to play in 2024 for the Mountaineers. But West Virginia travels to Lubbock, Texas to end their tumultuous roller coaster ride, controversial in a way, drama filled 2024 regular season, and they get embarrassed. The Mountaineers get shellacked, they get embarrassed, they get destroyed, they get decimated. Any other words you want to add to describe that performance? I'm sure they're fitting. Some of them maybe not even appropriate, but I'm sure they're fitting. 52-15, the final score. Texas Tech gets their 8th win of the year, so kind of an afterthought program, a program that's normally competitive, but never really great. They've not had the great years that West Virginia has had in the past, even though they're generally competitive. They always score a lot of points. They usually give up a lot too. They didn't on this day. They have an 8-4 year. So based on their expectations and kind of being an afterthought entering the season, a respectable season to say the very, very least. Similar to what Mountaineer fans felt a year ago when West Virginia finished their regular season after minimal expectation entering the season at 8-4, and they won 9 in a bowl game. But then they enter this year, all the hype, McAfee back on the wagon, everything pointed to this being even a better year. Maybe a little harder of a schedule, but Penn State is at home. Get competitive there and then see what happens. It's a new era of the college football playoff, of course. You win it, you're in at least, even if not with the bye. And maybe the door was somewhat open. Neal Brown and company talking about the playoff vocally. They said they had to win the Big 12 and compete for a playoff berth to even have that be a successful year. A much more veteran team in 2024 than in 2023 even. And nothing close to any of that happened. Loss after loss. The wins didn't really feel that good. Obviously, Neal Brown goes viral multiple times. The national media makes fun of the program all over again. And it's all drama. It's mostly bad. The roller coaster ride leads you to 6-6. And capping off the year with, after last year, it was a victory in Texas when Zach Frazier had a heads-up play after his injury to allow the Mountaineers to come back and win a game that they almost blew, but they did win. They had the luck on their side. They go to a bowl game and win. They ride that momentum. Now, all the momentum they maybe thought they had after winning a regular season finale at home goes away by losing the overall regular season finale on the road in Texas to the Red Raiders. You think a beatable team or winnable game, but I always thought that road trip was going to spell disaster, but it did that and then some. So I'm holding an event session here, of course. I'm home covering this. I'm not in Lubbock, Texas, one of those difficult road trips imaginable. Probably wouldn't even have been there if this was an undefeated Mountaineer team, but nonetheless not there. So I think Greg Hunter, tip of the cap to him. He's talking to Neal Brown as we're speaking. He's really the only WVU media member I think is there. So Greg, more power to you. Hopefully you have a safe trip home and had somewhat of a solid day there in Lubbock. But go ahead and vent. Otherwise, I'll give you some of my takes and we'll wrap this up. Wanted to give a post-game show here. Obviously, my game recap is in WV Sports Now. You have more coverage coming at WV Sports Now. And obviously, more of this is going to unravel in the coming days and weeks and into the new year. I will lead you with this, and I said this on Mountaineer Report earlier in this week leading into this game, and Cody Nesper, my colleague at WVSN, even agreed that the smoke was dying out around Neal Brown. And yes, if you go on X, namely, not even just social media, but you go on X, which is a dumpster fire, even though I get it's not going anywhere and you got to be there. It was running rampant on X. Everywhere else, maybe YouTube, but everywhere else, the smoke was dying out. And it felt like, from what I was hearing, from what others were hearing, from what people in the know were hearing, and from what was being said and even kind of reported, that they were likely keeping Neal Brown. And it doesn't mean that they love Neal Brown. It doesn't mean Neal Brown's going to go ahead and have a statue built for him outside the stadium. It doesn't mean necessarily the next year will be that much better. And yeah, money is, of course, a factor, as it always is. But it also felt like that after Kurt Cignetti re-upped at Indiana, And I've already articulated that I think Rich Rodriguez is a very up and down, no guarantee hire at all. But I've heard, and many have said, that he may not want to deal with WVU all over again. And coming, if you don't achieve the hype, don't achieve close to that first tenure, is just going to ruin things for you in terms of your legacy. The what if story will be, we know you couldn't do it again. So I don't think Rich Rod is happening, but I also don't think it would be a guaranteed lock success story anyway. And the coaches that were in rumors, not all of them legit reports, even though people tried to pass them off as legit reports, but even the coaches in rumors, similar to Neal Brown in 2019, similar retread, similar like hire to if you brought in Neal Brown in 2019. At the time, bringing in Neal Brown in 2019 was thought to be a unanimous home run hire. That was after getting Troy to the top 25 and competing with LSU and upsetting them, and he had a great time there. And Odom's doing the same thing at UNLV, for example. He's the name everyone's aware of. I'm telling you right now, he has not been handed the job. Those reports are false. But he could be hired. Wouldn't be crazy. That'd be a Ren Baker type move. Felt like a Neal Brown retread in 2019, though. And because of all of that, I was starting to hear smoke that Neal Brown's just going to come back. They don't want to ruin this recruiting class. They don't want to have to re-recruit this all over again. They don't want to lose Jaheim White and Traylon Ray, etc. And I get, after 6 years, you're just done. Even if you lose players, next year got to be a rebuild. You'd rather do that than have next year be another bad year on Neal Brown. I get the fan perspective, knowing that eventually you're going to lose players and have a stressful recruiting season, and it's going to be bad, and maybe you got to rebuild. And yes, you can quickly turn things around in today's college football, but whether you can or cannot is a different story. Maybe you just eventually rip off the Band-Aid. But I was starting to hear smoke it wasn't going to happen. He was going to come back. But then you get to this game, and I always felt this would be a loss. But you lose this way, where it does feel like the team kind of quit on you, even though they came up strong towards the end. And they played tough at home at UCF, even though they're a bad team. So at that point, it didn't feel like the players quit on Brown. But they just got shellacked, destroyed, mollywhopped, whatever you want to say. 52-15, you can't lose that way at any time when you're the West Virginia program. You just shouldn't. You are a more historic program than Texas Tech. To be honest, they're right there, bowl wins, but that's it. Everything else West Virginia has above them, historically speaking. You beat them last year, even though that was in Morgantown. And then you get this result. Does this change anything? Does this turn that smoke into fire again outside of social media? Because again, fans may just live on X and YouTube. That is not always reality. I'm there all the time too. I hear it. I'm guilty too, maybe. It's not always reality. I was hearing smoke that X was wrong. Maybe X is going to get right again because of 52-15. It's hard to sell bringing a coach back, not in year 1 or 2, not in 3. Okay, maybe you're early on then. But after 6 years and your biggest win is lifting a Duke's Mayo Bowl trophy, this is a program that has won every major bowl around with the exception of the Rose Bowl. For the most part. And that's the 20, 30 years prior to Brown, and even success prior to that in program history. So I will go to the chat now. Obviously, 52-15 if you're just joining us. Neal Brown, West Virginia now fall to 6-6. They end the regular season going to a bowl game. They get bowl eligible, but 40th and 41st, I believe, in program history now. And that's right up there all time. I believe second right now in the new Big 12. But what does that do for you when you entered the season saying it was Big 12 title or college football playoff or bust? The program, the players, Neal Brown, they said that. It was not a fan thing. It was not anyone guessing in fans or media on what the expectations are or should be. We do that a lot covering the Mountaineers and rooting for the Mountaineers. People do that a lot, whether it be fans or media. Here's what the expectations are. Here's what they should be. It's been going on for a long time. The program set the standard this year. The coaches and players on down said Big 12 title or bust. Get to Dallas at minimum. Get to the game or bust. Not even close to happening. Not even close. Let's go to... Okay, I've been a Neal Brown supporter. This one was tough. Sure. I hear that, John, for sure. Neal's got to go tonight or tomorrow. He cannot be this coach Monday morning. It is interesting timing wise when you think this should happen if it's going to, because obviously the Dana divorce where he resigned, but they really were divorcing. That happened in January. People are saying it put him behind the eight ball and they got forced into hiring Neal Brown. Neal Brown, again, was viewed as a unanimous solid hire at that time. There were other programs that did want him. Okay. He had Power Five at that point opportunities then. He was the Odom of that era. So it's not like they were upset to be hiring Neal Brown back then. You got to get your mind back then. Obviously now is a different story, but the money will go down. I mean, are you paying more for a buyout just to do this earlier? I get a search, I get all of that. And by the way, guys, I'm telling you right now, it's not a 0% chance he's coming back. He could be back. I heard smoke that he was coming back prior to this game. This game could change it for sure. But if he came back, I would not be shell shocked at all. But if he is gone, I would be surprised if it's Sunday. Could be wrong. This is a post-game show. This is going to be an evergreen broadcast. Could be wrong. Just because they're going to pay more just to do it earlier to make the fans happy, I don't think so. They're going to drag that out, get the money as low as it can be, unless they really find a coach that they love and they got to go after and got to lock in. But you also need a lot of money for the buyout, plus who you're going to hire, plus everything else that you're likely rebuilding the roster with. Plus, you have to decide who that new coach is bringing with him, whether it's good enough to win relatively quickly or not. Remember, Curt Cignetti on his turnaround in Indiana, he brought a lot with him. Is that happening too? That's not a guarantee either, even if you find your guy. But if they're not hitting a home run higher, I get being done with Brown. If they're not hitting a home run higher, what are you doing? What home run higher is out there? I've told you, I don't think Rich Rod's a home run higher. I don't think that's a home run higher. Snetty's re-upped at Indiana. Who's the home run higher? You're not getting Nick Saban. I know all the fans want Jimbo, but there's issues there too. He won a national title, and then all the money he had at Texas A&M, they did not win. He could come. Nobody else seemingly does want him. He's never in rumors really anywhere else the last couple years. Is that really a home run hire? And do you really need to do that so early? You could let that linger. That, if you're bringing Jimbo in, means that you're not doing Brown tomorrow. You probably could let that linger and still get him. It's not like some other team is hiring him tomorrow. No to Rich Rod. I'm not going to do the whole essay that I wrote in my commentary, but it's on WV Sports now. The biggest act of the athletic director can do is hire the football coach. 100%. I mean, I think Gren Baker's done a great job in hiring Darren DeVries. Fans were off the wagon after the brawl basketball-wise, but he's turned it around. They're very competitive. He's done great in recruiting, whether it be this year or next year, based on the circumstances, based on taking it over after drama. He seems excited to be there. He respects the history. He wants to be there for a while. He fits in culturally. Granted, so did Neal Brown when he came aboard, even though DeVries is from the other side of the country. So I think Darren DeVries is a solid hire so far. We're only early in year one. Volleyball was a coup hire to get somebody with success across the country. They've been up and down, but I definitely think that's a solid hire for a program that was floundering and finally needed to make a change. That was going across the country to get somebody and not worrying about any connections. Again, connections are not a Ren Baker thing he cares about. The baseball program must send somebody, but they are a successful program right now. And if that doesn't work, Ren Baker has pretty much vocalized, this isn't my guy. I'm going to do this for Maisie and what the program wants. And having Steve Sabins take over and be the guy right now, I trust in him. But if it's not, we'll move on. So then they can go get somebody else there. Obviously, Mark Kellogg has really worked out. The women's basketball program is elite and winning and undefeated as we're speaking. And last year, they go to the NCAA tournament. They take over after Don P. drama. If they played anybody else, they probably would have been in the Sweet 16. They hang tough with Caitlin Clark. And then this year, you don't know. Who knows? They're looking good so far. We'll see what they do in Big 12 play. But Ren Baker's done well hiring so far. It's hard to say anything else. Football is the one that matters, though. Even more than basketball, even though basketball is even more historic and maybe the brand stronger overall, football is where the money got to be. Football is where college sports is. Football is the reason why conference realignment is going on and has been the way it's been. It's all about football, not basketball. The football hire is more important, 100%. Can't lose that way at all. Yeah, a West Virginia team should never lose that way, 100%. Even in a bad year, that is an embarrassing loss. There have been bad years. Rich Rod's 3-win season, Dana's 4-win year, Brown 5-7 2 years ago. You can't lose that way. end a year that way, even on the road in a tough place to play. No. I know Mayo Bowl was without Drake May 100%. I mean, there has not really been a major. There's not an Orange Bowl win like Dana had. There's not the Rich Rod tenure. There's not the Don Nalen tenure. There's nothing to really hang your hat on if you're Neal Brown yet. He does a few rank wins, but they're early in the tenure. He did win the Mayo Bowl, and he does have a couple bowl wins. But yes, Drake May did not play. I mean, they fired Mac Brown too, even though he wanted to stay. Drake May's a good QB. He was in college, but they weren't undefeated with him. They were an average program. They still could have maybe beat them, but he did not play. And, last year's brawl was against one of the worst Pitt teams in 30 plus years. They were a 3-9 team. So what does that do you? Phil Jurkovec was horrendous. Are those really big wins? Virginia Tech has been average like you, and they were in those years. You beat him for the back-to-back Black Diamond Trophy games, but what do they really matter? Yeah, there has not been a major big win. See, there's not a big, I do not, yes. So Todd Brooks is one of the greatest running backs in Big 12 history, the greatest running back in Texas Tech history. He has the program rushing title. There's not a great talent gap between West Virginia and Texas Tech. There is between West Virginia and, Georgia, or West Virginia and Ohio State, even though I know they lost to Michigan or Penn State. We saw in week 1. There is not between West Virginia and Texas Tech. I don't even think Wikipedia is right half the time, and you shouldn't follow them. Go to them. The history's equal, if not better, for West Virginia. So though you watch one game and then live off of it forever, that's just not factually accurate. I think one of the issues is Garrett Green did not progress this year. They had a lot of issues this year, and Brown certainly didn't have his best season coaching, and then everything else on down. I mean, it was all bad. But in terms of recruiting numbers, in terms of talent, with the exception of Brooks, who's the best player on the field, it's not like Texas Tech is out there riddled with talent like Georgia, for crying out loud here. I mean, West Virginia has a similar roster and similar players that you guys all loved a year ago. Jaheim White didn't get to take that step up. Cole Taylor didn't take that step up, even though he's still good. Anthony Wilson, I don't think anyone really took a step up. Everyone either stabilized and was as good as they were, regressed. I think Garrett Green regressed. He made way more mistakes this year. He definitely regressed. Who took a step up? Who got better this year? I mean, Michael Hayes and Oliver Straw. I mean, that's all we got. And Oliver Straw had a really bad game in recent memory, too. Joseph here. Let me see. Joseph, you so-called media shouldn't ask who, but when. I don't know if you just missed the show, but the entire opening of the show, number 1, was me talking about when the decision about Brown should come, when I think it will come, and saying that I would do it, even though I, again, thought going into the game they were going to keep Brown. That was the entire beginning of the show. Number 2, you're not going to just lie. See, that's a perspective that I think is annoying maybe for us in media, and that is why there's always this adversarial relationship potentially. The fans right now want media to come out there and say Brown's going to be fired tomorrow, the coach will be hired in the next 24 hours, the coach will be the greatest coach of all time, the program will clip off wins in the future, Neal Brown will never breathe air in West Virginia ever again. And if anything else is said, if anyone's reporting what is said to them by sources who are legit, and if anyone would come out here and say, well, I don't think they should keep Neal Brown, but they're going to, or this is why they may, or this is going to happen, or they're going to wait to make this decision, or Ren Baker's not knee-jerk, or this is reality of the situation, then the fans are mad at the media. Like, that just makes no freaking sense. I'm telling you what I heard before the game. I admit this game was horrendous. It was worse than I predicted, and I predicted a loss. It could easily change things. I said year 6 is too long. I told Cody on our show when he kind of wanted to keep Neal Brown that I, hear what you're saying based on recruiting, based on if you can't get a home run higher. But I think year 6 is a bridge too far, and maybe they will keep him, but I would probably make a change now. Said all that. I wrote about it 2 years ago, wrote about it last year. I've been saying I would have made a change 3 years ago. And yet you're saying that. That's just ludicrous. Follow the fool on coverage or else don't make a ridiculous comment. Anyone else who has any actual legit comments? And I absolutely love doing this with fans. I don't ever want to rant at fans, by the way, but if you're just going to throw out slander, then I'm going to do it. Charlie Huff at Marshall out-recruits Neal. Go get him, for crying out loud. That's also not accurate in any capacity. Marshall's having a better year this year. I believe they have 8 wins as we're speaking right now. We're about to get 8 or something to that effect. Yeah, it's great to do that at Marshall, 100%. He had a horrible year last year. And it was all kinds of drama where he was in viral comments all last year. His overall career is not better than Neal Brown. There's no guarantee he would take success at Marshall in a group of 5 in that conference and do it at West Virginia in the Big 12 in the Power 4. And Marshall's recruiting numbers are not better. I don't know. That again, that is a comment where you hate what's going on in the present, so you're borderline making things up. Marshall was close to firing Huff last year. There was if we were doing the show a year ago, people wanted Marshall to fire Huff. Yes, he's turned it around, but that's just absurd. McAfee as GM is it's funny. I mean, again, McAfee's not going to leave his show, but that's hilarious because, Andrew Luck getting hired at Stanford, if you're going to get a former player, sure. I think McAfee's fine doing what he's doing. Just being a former great player, I'll say what I said on X, being a former great player, you can support the program and even put money in the program. That doesn't mean you're qualified to be a GM. Andrew Luck, I believe, he's smart enough. Look at all his scores across the board, and he was an elite player at a real important position. He's the most famous, Tiger Woods and him, the most famous as long as they got going. So football-wise, GM-wise, I think Andrew makes tons of sense there. Oliver Luck's obviously been involved with WVU before in high-ranking capacities, his father as an AD, etc. I think, and I said this too, I think Oliver Luck messed up the schedule. I think stacking with 11 Power 4s going to the new Big 12 was a wrong move, and that was mostly him. I think that was a miscalculation when nobody else was doing that. So I don't think I'd even want him back. But Andrew Luck at Stanford's great. Yeah, McAfee as GM would be funny. I'd like to cover it. I'm sure that's not going to happen, though. And I don't think the GM at West Virginia is the issue. Everyone loved the GM when they hired him out of NFL experience, etc. a year or so ago. What they do there is probably irrelevant when you're looking at what you do with the coaching staff. We can't win with these players. Who cares if some leave? All these guys are on street level recruits or on street level recruits. I'm assuming you're saying like not good recruits there with that, street level recruits. Guys, there are some good players, but yeah, I mean, this roster underachieved. They didn't perform. The team wasn't good enough as a whole. The transfers didn't work this year. Some of them were transfers that other major programs wanted. Garnet Hollis was somebody that Penn State wanted, for crying out loud, and you saw how bad he was. Garnet Hollis was a major catastrophe, not even disappointment. He was a catastrophe. Ohio State, okay. Ohio State JV, is that what you're saying there? I see it's something else in front of Ohio State JV. Yeah, Bree Carrico is maybe who you're talking about. Literally speaking, he was Ohio State JV. I think he's a solid player, though. But Garnet Hall, the point I'm making, Garnet Hollis was wanted by Penn State and other major programs. There were a lot of players and recruits from high school and even the transfers this past year that were wanted by major programs. Even people making fun of the commits they flipped from group of 5s and from the MAC earlier this week. One of them was offered by Nebraska. They're not even the only major program that was offering the kid. It's not like it was just WVU. Nebraska also wanted him. And yeah, they're floundering, but Matt Rule is somebody that everyone thinks is a great coach, and I'd imagine you'd flip him to have him instead of Neal Brown. He wanted the kid. So the point of it is a lot of the high school players they got this past year were wanted elsewhere. Were wanted by major programs, transfers, etc. Didn't work, obviously. But a year earlier, they hit a home run with Beanie Bishop, who ended up becoming a consensus All-American, and they won 9 games. And I do think Cole Taylor is a solid player. I do think some of those moves did work. TJ Jackson was a transfer player. Obviously, he's a solid player. Josiah Trotter is a great recruit. He had a bad penalty in this game, but a great recruit. He spurned Clemson, other programs who did want him to come to West Virginia. He didn't play last year off of an injury, but he was a top high school recruit for sure. And they do have 4 stars. Yeah, they lost one recently, but they still even have others. They had them in the last several years. Rodney Gallagher, Penn State wanted him. They never really get elite receivers. Obviously, he's not been that, and he was changing positions. But at that time, 2 years ago, they thought he could, and they wanted him. And he almost decommitted, but he stayed because Brown stayed, and he ended up coming to WVU. So West Virginia has had some recruiting wins. No, it's not enough. You could argue that the past recruiting tenures of Dana and even Rich Rod, Bill Stewart were overrated. Even when they had great years, it's not like they were getting top 10 recruiting classes. The program never has done that, even in great years. It's just not going to happen. You don't have enough in your high school base. You're looking all around the region. You can't say live in the Whippeal like Pitt could. You can't live in West Virginia. You have to go to the Whippeal. You have to go to Virginia. You got to go to Georgia. You got to go to Ohio, etc. So they didn't do enough. They didn't get enough. The players weren't good enough, and recruiting high school and transfers obviously wasn't enough this past year to avoid this disaster of a season. And the future next year doesn't look that much better. But if you do fire Brown and the staff, you're likely dealing with worse than that. And in terms of who's on the roster, who you wouldn't want to leave, do you want Jaheim White to leave? Not a good year. He's a stud still. He's showing it still, even in this game. He's good. And he was overlooked by a lot, but he's good. Do you want him to leave? Traylon Ray, hurt now. Maybe he'll stay because of the injury, but he is a premier, talented player that I know for a fact other programs will want. Colleagues around the country who cover other programs, including some elite ones, a lot of the time say that's a guy that I think we actually would want in Traylon Ray. So do you want to keep him? I doubt it. If you're firing Brown, who do you want as the QB? If any of you, because there's a lot of people that love Nico and think he should have played more. If you want Nico, you're probably not firing Brown. If you fire Brown, you're probably not getting Nico. They're kind of attached to the hip. There are things to think about there. And if you cannot hit that home run hire, if you cannot find that coach, then I don't know what bringing in Odom or somebody like that would do. How is that better for the program unless you just want to be done with Neal Brown? But again, I said I would do it. I do think 6 years is too long. I don't think the wins have been there. This is the darkest tenure in program history since before Don Nalen, etc. Good players all over the country, everyone can replace. That's the mentality. That'll be a wild winter, I will tell you. I'll be a busy man. And that new coach would then likely in that scenario have to be hired very early, and you then would need to flood. And they would need, money and all that to do that. And you'd be spending it some on the buyout. Neal Brown is not going to, he might, agree to take $1 million or $2 million less to be nice. He is a nice guy, but he's not going to give you the buyout for free. He's not going to UMass guys, but even if he would, even if I buy into that, they're going to have to pay the buyout, or he's going to have to do something, or something's going to be figured out. He's not going to say, you just keep it and I'll go here. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So if you can't figure out that money plus the new money plus recruiting money, you can't do it. And that's the decision right now being made. Neo needs to leave. He single-handedly is making players worse. I'm sure Neo would stay. He will make Neo 10 times worse. Neo's not going to quit, nor should he. Would you? Would you resign your current job if your boss tells you you're not good at it, I'm not going to fire you, and you resign would be the only way, we save any money. But if you don't resign, I'm giving you millions and millions of dollars. Come on. You would take the money. You would say, I'm here forever. You're going to have to fire me. I'm taking the money. There's nobody that will resign and give up that buyout. No one. It's just not the case. Yeah, Ren is a money man. I do think he's smart with money. He convinced North Texas to build a baseball stadium before they even had a baseball team. So I do think he's really, really good with money. I don't think this is Ren's fault money-wise, and he also inherited a lot of drama, whether it be Huggins, Don P, or whatever else throughout the athletic program. But I don't think Ren's also a magic man. I mean, it's a lot. Again, he's not a magician. I do think he's really good with money, though. Yeah, even if I'll put you this way, the two possibilities are going to happen here. Well, three. There's three possibilities, guys. And I'm not going to do this forever because I have more coverage to go. So eventually we'll wrap this up. I think right now it's just us here chatting along. There's three possibilities of how this is going to wrap. Either they keep him And then obviously next year has tons of pressure. And if it's not better, then he would, I know for sure they're not going to just do decades of this. Then he would be fired. Maybe it's a better coaching cycle. Maybe the money's better. Maybe they get donations. Maybe they actually bet more next year with Brown because they start out with RMU. They have Ohio. Then they have Pitt at home. If they start 3-0, maybe the vibes are better. I don't know. The schedule's easier. They don't have that rough road game or even home game against Penn State to open up a season. They don't have a P4 even to open up a year. Last time Brown did not have a P4 to open up a season was his first year against JMU, who went from FCS to FBS. Every other year is a legit P4 to open up the year, and most of those are on the road prior to 2024. Next year in 2025 is Robert freaking Morris in Morgantown. They're going to win. Brown wins those games. Ohio, who knows what a group of 5 will do, but assuming they win. And then you have Pitt at home. They could easily beat Pitt at home. They should have won last year in Pittsburgh. So if they're 3-0, maybe you keep on moving. That's one possible scenario. And if they didn't get shellacked in this game, or certainly if they would have won this game against Texas Tech, I would have leaned that happening. The other scenario is they fire Neal Brown. They fire him. They make it announced as a firing. They end this 6-year journey. They absolutely are going to be on the hook for something. That's going to have to be discussed. Maybe it would be discussed between the two parties mutually. Maybe Brown's sick of this too, but they just want to announce it as a firing because he's not been good enough, and it's just a firing, and then they move on. They do kind of what North Carolina did with Mac Brown, where he said, I want to stay. They say, we don't want you to stay. We're working something out. You're fired. It was announced as a firing. And then the third option is what happened with the Dana divorce, where maybe they want to move on. Maybe Neal wants to move on. Maybe they want to do a firing, but maybe they're being nice about it. Maybe they work out a deal because they don't want to pay the full buyout. And Neal says, I'll calm down on the buyout. I'll take $1 million or $2 million less, but you can't announce as a firing. Those things happen all the time behind the scenes. So maybe then they would just announce the mutually parting ways, and Neal would go do whatever. They would then do a national coaching search. And again, I think Ren Baker has done very well in that so far in his tenure at WVU. Darren DeVries is an example. Mark Kellogg is another one. One of those 3 options are going to happen in the coming days and weeks. How do you figure that when they clearly had better team speed? What position group is decent at WVU? Texas Tech is a better team this year, 100%. Last year, West Virginia was a better team than Texas Tech. West Virginia beat Texas Tech last year. These players on Texas Tech are not all new. Brooks has been there, guys. Brooks was there last year, and West Virginia beat Texas Tech. My point of it is Texas Tech's recruiting numbers, Texas Tech's history, Texas Tech's numbers across the board throughout college football the last 100 years, and even the last 4 or 5 under Neal Brown have not been that much better. We're not talking about an elite program here. We're talking about a mid-tier program that's losing out for top recruits to every other program in Texas in that area. There may be a similar vibe, if anything else, to West Virginia. The Mountaineers got destroyed. Texas Tech is better this year. Clearly, they're faster. They look more athletic. They looked better coached. But if we flip it to a year ago, the same was said. The same was said. I was sitting in the press box in Morgantown with somebody who covered Texas Tech, who's covered them for 40 plus years, was saying the same things about them. My point is, these players were all recruited years ago. This is all not 100% new roster. I do not, if the talent disparity cannot be what you're saying, or else last year would not have occurred. You also have to look at it this way. Were those players in West Virginia really giving a damn? They went to Lubbock, one of the worst road trips in the country, on a year that's already disappointing, already out of it. And yeah, 7 wins is better than 6, but was it to them that much? Was it to them that much? Maybe you would have felt better. Would they cared to go 7-5 or 6-6? I don't think the talent is year in and year out, 52-15 is what I'm saying. Okay. The history series is very close as well. I believe it's separated by 1 game off the top of my head. There have been mad moments. Jarrett Doege going down there. JT Daniels going down there. I get going down there. Going to Lubbock is the problem. In Morgantown, it's usually favoring the Mountaineers. That's what it is. That's that rivalry or series, not really a rivalry. So it looked a disparity today, but I do not think the recruiting numbers, the transfer portal numbers, how it's been under Neal Brown is what you're saying, that it's just Texas Tech way better. That has not been the case. I'm firing Neal Brown. So Mike Shanahan is the OC at Indiana and great record at JMU as head coach before that. What do you think? So here's a couple things. And again, then I probably will wrap this show. You have to decide if say the program's firing Neal Brown or they're parting ways, or you want to fire Neal Brown and have those conversations. In terms of who then takes over, if we get to a point where everyone agrees that home run hires are probably not going to happen, you're not going to get Kirk Nettie, for example, that would have been the home run hire with some ties. And maybe we all agree that the Rich Rod thing's not going to really work or happen. Maybe you think Jimbo's not going to happen because Jimbo Fisher would still want some money. And yeah, he doesn't have tons of opportunities, but he still has a ring and has a solid overall resume and may command a lot. So maybe he doesn't want to do it either and deal with the home state thing. So we get past all of that. And then you're looking at a Ren Baker national search that is like Darren DeVries, that is now just him trying without any of that clouding over it. You have to decide, do you prioritize, and I'll ask you guys, I guess, maybe misplaced hillbilly, I'll ask you, would you rather have a group of 5 head coach like a Neal Brown retread, which would basically kind of be an Odom situation that, again, is talked about a lot on social media, or a coordinator that does not have the head coaching resume, but is a hot coordinator like a Kotelnicki, for example, to be literal, at Penn State, because his name is brought up a lot. Which one of those would you rather? Now, maybe you want a group of 5, or maybe you want a power 4 with a great power 4 resume. Sure, so does everybody else. Obviously, that's the top thing. If you can't have that, and I'm not saying you can't have it, I'm saying that hypothetically, if you can't have it, would you rather another group of 5 Neal Brown head coach or a coordinator that has not been a head coach to success and has not done it before? I'm telling you, Ren Baker has made it clear publicly that he prioritizes having been a head coach over not. I do think Ren Baker would lean towards a guy who's been a head coach, even if not at a major power 4. Yeah, Ryan Day is funny. Yeah, I mean, obviously they're upset with him and their standards are insane, and that was bad for sure. That's a bad Michigan team. They just won national title. They've been beating him recently, of course, with Harbaugh, and then they beat him again in a year that Ryan Day should have certainly clipped him and had a much better team. They paid $20 million for that roster, and you lose to Michigan if that's the number one goal each year, even above everything else as a team. Yeah, obviously really, really bad. The way they lost that, really, really bad for sure, but don't see that happening. But if he's fired there and wants a major job, maybe, but would you want him? I mean, I guess he's getting wins, just maybe not those fully big ones. And if Ohio State fans are happy, that doesn't mean necessarily you would, with the different expectations, but probably not happening. But that's what you got to think about. That's what I'll throw back to misplaced hillbilly there. That's what you got to think about. If you agree with everything else that I said here, and you're looking at a group of 5 or an assistant, which one would you rather? Because I think Ren Baker would rather have a guy who's been a head coach versus someone who's just been a coordinator, or mostly has coordinator resume on him. That's the thing. Yeah, as long as you don't have to play Michigan, he'll be fine. Yeah, obviously the Michigan game won't be happening. They did schedule, it's still right now as we're speaking, have Alabama on the schedule coming up in 2026, but Michigan not there. So yeah, maybe. I don't see that, but it's not like it would be insane. I mean, yes, if you don't play Michigan and you don't get to the point of being a solid program before you're worrying about national titles, then he's done at least that, for sure, even though Ohio State fans are happy or unhappy with him. But it's not like he hasn't won games. Granted, the talent there is insane. So is that him, or is that the talent winning? And then is it him, or is the talent that then disappoints? You got to decide that too. That's going to probably do it unless anybody has anything else. I wanted to do this because obviously I was covering this game from home and not in Lubbock. The Mountaineers get turkey basted, for a Thanksgiving phrase, 52-15 on the road. They end the 2024 regular season 6-6. They do have a bowl game coming up. It is the 41st bowl game in program history. That's a high number. That's top 25 all time. But the history is not saving the present for the Mountaineers right now. And you got to decide what you're doing with Neal Brown before anything else matters. You got to weigh all the options we discussed on this show. I told you, I was reporting it. I'm not just saying it because it's what I wanted. It wasn't. I've said I get year 6 is too much for Neal Brown, and I would pull this trigger. But I said that I thought smoke was dying out, and unless you're on X only, Neal Brown was probably coming back before kickoff of this game. In our recent show all week, I was hearing things like that. He lose 52-15 though. I mean, I'm doing this. I don't know what he said to Greg Hunter and whoever hell else was there, but outside of, we lost, we got our asses beat, and we're going to fly back, and it sucks. We got to regroup and for the bowl game, I guess, try to have a winning season. I'm guessing that's kind of what he said. You're not going to get an announcement from him, obviously, but there's nothing that's going to make anyone feel better about this year after all the hype, nor should you. This is not a acceptable season by any means. And if this year happened a year ago when they only were supposed to win 4 games, maybe you could try to sell this as a successful year, but not after winning 9, coming off the 9-win year, coming off the bowl win, having a veteran roster, and having all the hype of the offseason, and to end at 6-6, barely getting in a bowl game. And the wins are only really against bad teams. You lose the brawl. The schedule's getting a little easier next year, but then it's ramping up again the year after that. And programs are firing coaches 1, 2, 3 years in, whether that's fair or not. This is 6 going into year 7. And this feels like 2022, even though there's a bowl game. That's what this does. 2024 feels like 2022, but with a bowl game. And I'm not sure anybody wants the bowl game. So more of our coverage is at WV Sports now. I'll wrap it up here. I do appreciate everybody in the chat. Again, I like talking with the fans. I don't ever want to make this adversarial. I just ask not to make things up or slander. And that was what happened earlier. But if we can just not do that, then we're good. But Neal Brown's not good. The program's not good. Things didn't work out. It wasn't good this year, to say the very least.